Hi guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. Today you join me in the 2023 Nissan Juke Hybrid, a very popular crossover that's one of Britain's best-selling cars, and I'm here today to find out why this one stands out amongst the competition. There's loads of these crossovers on the market right now, so let's see if this really stacks up. Let's have a quick run through of all of the different trims and options. So the line starts with the Vizia, which is about 20 grand here in the UK, and that is a pretty basic car, to be honest. It doesn't even get you a standard infotainment system. It just comes with a very basic screen with a DAB radio. But it does come with stuff like LED headlights as standard, and also cruise control, which is obviously a great feature to have. Even traffic sign recognition is standard across the range, which is nice for a modern family car. 2 grand more gets you the Centre trim, which gets you a rear view camera and the standard 8-inch infotainment system that comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You also get some exterior styling, such as nicer wheels as standard with that car. Next up, for another 2 grand more, is the N-Connector, which comes with some of the more techie stuff that you might want. This one comes with keyless entry, which is a really nice feature to have, and also auto hold, automatic climate control, satellite navigation, and this bigger 7-inch driver's display between the physical dials, which is a really nice addition. And then the top of the range cars, the Tecna and the Tecna Plus, which start from around £26,000. This particular one that I've got here is 30 grand with all the bells and whistles. But to be honest, it's a nice generous specification considering what you get. So for sort of 26, 27 grand, you get yourself 19-inch alloys, a 360-degree camera, which makes this thing really easy to park, Bose Personal Plus audio, a heated steering wheel and a heated windscreen, and also some nice ambient lighting in the cabin. Drivetrains, you've got 2 options. The entry-level car comes with a 1-litre turbo 3-cylinder, which is quite rough, to be honest with you, and probably not the one I would go for. It has around 114 horsepower, and you can get it with either a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic, which is quite nice. The one I'm in here today is the 1.6-litre 4-cylinder hybrid. This is a self-charging hybrid, which is actually a pretty nice combination, and it has about 143 horsepower. It's about a second quicker 0 to 60 at around 10.1, which doesn't sound a lot, but it's off the line. The electric power really provides a nice brisk little push, and the fuel economy has been really good. I've been averaging around 50 miles per gallon, and that's with mixed driving as well, nothing too crazy. I have seen up to 70 on a short journey. The gearbox in this is a bit of an interesting one though. It's a 4-speed auto that's mated to the combustion engine, and then a 2-speed transmission for the electric part. This hybrid one has a 46-litre fuel tank, which might not sound that big, but it quotes up to around 600 miles on a single tank if you're driving really sensibly. I haven't achieved quite that, but still it's impressive for the size of the tank and the amount you're going to be filling this up. I've been driving this all week, and quite a bit as well, and I've still got more than half a tank of fuel. So let's talk about styling then. Well, when I used to hear Nissan Juke, I used to think, oh, a bit of sick came up then. It's, yeah, never really a pretty car, never one that I gelled with at all. Now, I'm pleased to report that this one is a lot more handsome. It does look quite interesting compared to some of the other crossovers on the market. I wouldn't say it's the prettiest, that's definitely taking it a bit too far, but overall, it's not too bad at all. I really think the front end has matured, and the headlights do look good in operation, although it's still not for everyone. But the back has definitely made a nice impact. They've got this kind of like duckbill style tailgate, and the overall shape and form of the car looks quite cool. It's not like just a typical hatchback jumped up on stilts. It looks like it's purpose built, which is really cool. I still don't love it, mind you, but wow, is it a big improvement on the old one. Yeah, the old Nissan Juke is just bulbous and look like some sort of deformed frog. It's a hideous, horrible thing. A design cue that I'm not keen on, however, is the rear door handles. Not only are they a bit impractical, but also think of your kids trying to get in. If you've got someone who's a little bit short trying to reach up and grab it, bit of a pain. I do really like the paint on this one. It's a nice metallic blue, and it's only about 175 quid as an option, which is, you know, pretty impressive to be fair, considering what some other manufacturers charge for it. And everything else on this Tecna Plus car is included as standard, which is nice. Although there is no sunroof on this particular model. Because this is the Tecna Plus, I've also got the two-tone, so I've got the black roof, which is a nice contrast. The rear lights look a little bit old-fashioned, but they're not too bad, but the fronts are really nice LEDs. And I quite like the wheels on this one too. Obviously this is the top spec model, and they're not all going to be this nice, but they're 19s and they look pretty cool with this sort of aerodynamic design to them. Step inside and things are even more impressive. You get this really lovely dash, which in the higher end models has this Alcantara finish to it. It does have contrasting cloth in other models, but the Alcantara I think really sets it off. It's like a sort of a suede finish to it. It's got some contrast white stitching and piping. It looks really plush and premium, and it even extends onto the center console down by my legs, which means I've got a somewhat squishy place to put my knee, which you don't get in all cars in this price range. The seats are much the same. You get these kind of bucket seat style seats in here, which are quite comfortable. They're a little bit hard on the actual seat part of it, and the leather isn't the best quality. Think more Argos home office chair than Rolls-Royce, but it's going to be durable, let's be fair, and that's what you're going to buy a car like this for. And again, it has touches of that sort of Alcantara suede material on it as well, and you get some manual adjustment, which makes it comfortable for long journeys. The overall fit and finish isn't too bad at all. I really like the aircraft style vents that you can control really easily and point where you want them, and I like the fact that there's physical climate control buttons and dials, which have a nice quality feel to them, and they're all in the place you'd exactly expect. It just is a really nice layout, very intuitive. All of the controls accessible to you via the steering wheel, and also the stalks on the steering wheel column. They all appear in the dash, what's going on. You can see clearly what you're pressing and when, and there's nothing too complicated. If you want to bring up the camera, there's a button for camera. If you want to go home on the infotainment, there's a button for that. There's even a physical button for the brightness of the infotainment screen, which is really good. It's just very intuitive in a world where a lot of cars have become really complex. I do have a few minor quality disappointments, one of which being these window switches. One of them is an automatic one touch up and down, which is the driver's one. The one over the other side isn't automatic even on this switch here. Also, the buttons are really cheap and nasty feeling, and they've got this kind of texture to them that makes them get oily every time you touch them. They look like they've been pulled straight out of the Ford parts bin off of a 2001 Focus or something like that. But they work, so it is what it is. And also, I've got loads and loads of blank switches down here, which is a bit odd in a top-end car. I don't know whether you can spec anything for them. I don't really think so, but there's loads and loads of blanks. Like, the only ones I've actually got there is the brightness of the infotainment screen, and also the one-touch self-driving assist function for the cruise control. Also, the quality of the gear gator. Can you hear that? It makes that noise every time you shift it. It's just really weird, plasticky, leathery. It's yucky, and it makes this horrible squeaking noise. And of course, being not the highest end car on the market, you do get some cheap, scratchy plastics, but where you actually put your arms and the things that you touch are all covered in nice quality materials and feel pretty durable. You get a decent bit of space in your door bin for a bottle, and you've also got a space for your phone, some cup holders, and a little bit of storage in the center armrest. Glove box isn't the biggest, but it's not too bad. In the back, it's a little bit more squished, just because of the kind of curved roof line. You're not going to fit 3 adults back there comfortably, and the middle seat is quite cramped as well, so it is really more ideal to have 2 people in the back. But if you're just ferrying kids around, that's not going to be too much of a problem. And talking of, the ISOFIX points back there are the nice kind with the flip-up covers, so you're not going to lose them, and you're not going to ruin the quality of the seats by pushing your seats in and out. My other complaint about the rear is that there's no ski hatch or armrest in the middle. It is just a normal 60-40 split. There's also only one USB port for charging back there on the higher end models. The lower end cars don't get that at all. It's relatively refined in here as well. You're probably hearing a little bit of noise at the moment because it's raining, but overall the noise isn't too bad. A little bit of tyre noise from these 19-inch wheels, but that's not going to be a problem on lower end models. And the only complaint I really have about sort of the interior feel in terms of noise is this A-pillar. I seem to get a lot of wind noise from, even in ideal conditions. There's quite a lot of rustling coming from that area. Overall, it is quite comfortable and quite nice, and everyone who's got in this car seems to think it's a nice place to sit. I've also got ambient light in this model here, which is nice at night time. Everything's kind of got like an orange glow to it, which makes it really nice and comfortable. Boot space is pretty good too. There's nothing too amazing back there in terms of like your charge points and all that. It's a nice size space, especially with the seats folded down, and it's got a false floor, so you can either have a little bit of extra room, or you can have it up so that there's no load lip to contend with, and also it's flush with the back seats when folded down. Overall cabin space, it's not going to be quite as good as a proper big estate car, but this crossover size is ideal for a lot of people, including small families, because you just want something that's a little bit higher, that's easy to get in and out of, and easy to load things into. And it's still going to have enough space back there for plenty of luggage and boxes and so on and so forth. In terms of interior tech, it's pretty intuitive and easy to use. Like I said, everything's where you'd expect it to be if you're coming in from an older car. And I think that's why a lot of people buy these, because it's very familiar. You know, a lot of these newer cars, like a rival that I really like of this is a Peugeot 2008, because it's just a little bit more futuristic. It just has a bit more technology in it, but it's not quite as intuitive for people who are getting in it from a much older car and they want things to look and feel very familiar. I think this does that really well. The cluster I've got in front of me has really nice physical dials that have this white illumination. It's all very clear and easy to read. I've got my fuel gauge on the right, I've got the battery gauge on the left, and on the left hand side it shows me the state of the engine, whether I'm in eco mode, whether it's using power, or whether it's charging the batteries. And in the center you've got a few bits of information, like for example your Apple CarPlay song that's going on. You've got your drive mode select on there, a compass, your speed readout or economy. It shows you the electric flow and stuff like that. And at the top, just 3 nice clear bits of information: traffic sign recognition, the time, and the outside temperature. Nice and simple. This infotainment screen in the middle is very much the same. It is kind of angled away from me sitting here a little bit, but it's not too bad. The clarity and the brightness isn't the best. There's definitely rivals out there that are better. But overall, it's not bad at all. It does everything I need it to. It does have maps built in, but of course I'm using Apple CarPlay for that, which is nice and responsive. The actual responsiveness of the system is brilliant. It's kind of up there with the Koreans in terms of how quick it responds to touch, and also the way you can navigate through the menus. But there's nothing really fancy in terms of animation and design. It all looks a little bit bland and boring, and maybe a little bit dated if I'm honest. But you can still access all the essential functions through there, including stuff like adjusting your stereo, your sound options and EQ and things like that, and of course going into car settings and all that good stuff, and radio. But it's not too overcomplicated. The layout has kind of been designed, again, similarly to more old-fashioned cars, and I think that makes this a nice transitional car because it's got some of the modern sort of autonomous features about it and the safety tech. And sort of the newer technology of kind of it's more mainstream on these family cars now, but it's not too overwhelming if you're coming from a car that is a lot more old-fashioned. You may have noticed when I was showing you the seats, this Bose Personal Plus audio system. It's got these speakers in the headrest to provide this really wide soundstage, and although it's not the most clear system in the world, it's definitely got that punchy low down bass. It could do with a little bit more sound dampening in the doors, because if you crank the bass too much it starts to get a bit rattly, but if you tune it to the right place it does sound really good. And you can adjust the sort of width of that soundstage as well. You can make it sort of just the standard speakers that are in use, or you can include these headrest speakers as well. And if a song is mastered in such a way where it has a really wide soundstage, it makes a nice difference. It has this really sort of surround sound experience to it, and I really like it. I think the trade-off of it not being the sort of the most clear system on the market, I think actually, even though this feels like a little bit of a gimmick, it does make a really nice difference when listening to certain tracks. So what's it like to live with and drive then? It's actually very pleasant and very, very easy. The keyless entry system on the higher end models is really intuitive. You can just keep your key in the pocket. The car will lock and unlock as you walk away from it and walk towards it, which means that you don't even really have to interact with any touch sensors or buttons at all if you don't want to. You've got 2 simple drive modes, normal and eco, which are done at the push of a button by the gear selector. And the eco mode will basically utilize some of the electric stuff a little bit more, and the regen braking, and it dampens the throttle response just a little bit as well. I've been driving it in normal mode, the standard driving mode, and I think that's kind of fine for most people. As I said, I've still been getting over 50 miles per gallon with every single drive, so I prefer the feel of standard mode, so you know, your mileage may vary. There is also one singular button down here by the parking brake for e-pedal mode. Even though it won't bring you to a complete stop, it means that you can drive pretty much with one pedal for most of the time, pretty much like an electric car. So that's something that you can literally turn on or off with a single button. Really, really easy to use. And when you're not in e-pedal mode, the regen isn't too bad at all. Like, I can drive it along and I can let off the accelerator, and there's no like sudden harsh regen at all. It's using the engine braking to kind of charge the battery, so it doesn't start slowing down really harshly like some of these self-charging hybrids do. And the brakes themselves, not too spongy. If you try and really stamp on them, you'll notice that they do feel a little bit like jelly further down, but overall not bad for a hybrid whatsoever. The steering's nicely weighted as well. It definitely has this kind of heavy electric assistance feel to it. Like, I can feel like I don't have much texture from the road or feedback from what's going on with the wheels, but it handles okay. And overall, I feel as though the sort of extra weight compared to some of its rivals will make it more comfortable if you're used to an older car with sort of hydraulic steering that's a bit heavier. This kind of feels a little bit like that. The only complaint I have is when you're doing low speed maneuvers, sometimes it feels a little bit notchy at the very end of full lock. It sort of stops and then it will slowly feed a little bit more, which feels a little bit odd, and you can feel the electric assistance. But apart from that, the actual weight of it and the responsiveness of it, there's a little bit of jiggle from the chassis, but unless you're caning this around, which you're probably not going to be doing 90% of the time, it feels quite nice. Picks up quite nicely from the off with the electric, and you can feel the engine kick in, but it's quite smooth with that hybrid gearbox. If you listen, you can hear sometimes it does hang the gear, but if you kind of give it a bit of a prod on the accelerator, it tends to change up. And then as you're starting to slow down, it tends to drop into EV mode anyway. So it's not something that should bother you too much. Just something to bear in mind in terms of your overall refinement. Sometimes it can hang those gears. But overall, the combination is quite nice. And because it's not a CVT, you don't always get it screaming, which is good. You can hear sometimes it just doesn't want to change up. But it's smooth, that's what I like about it, and round town it's really, really buttery smooth thanks to that combination of the electric motor and the internal combustion engine. I think overall, even though you're not really going to get much sort of all electric, there is an electric vehicle button that you can press on the dash and it will literally drop it into EV mode until it needs charging. So there's that option to have it all in EV for sort of when you're just pottering around and you don't want the engine to kick in. So yeah, the handling's all right. If we're kind of like poodling along like this and I suddenly put my foot down, it does make quite a racket, and I've let off now and it's still not changing. There we go. It's not quick by any stretch, but it gets the job done. It's just not the best for sort of overtaking on the motorway. But as I say, this hybrid one, the low down really, really helps. There we go. You get a tendency to spin up a little bit with the front wheel drive if you really pin it from low down, especially in these wet conditions. But overall, the electric shove off the line is quite nice around town. Visibility is actually pretty good out of the back. It is actually quite a small car in terms of its proportions, so you're not going to feel like it's too difficult to park, especially with the 360 cam that's in this one. The 360 cam, the clarity isn't great, to be honest. The actual definition and resolution is quite low, but it still does a really good job of stitching together the pictures to give you a top-down view, which makes it a breeze parking. And sitting here driving it, looking around me, I wouldn't say it's really any bigger than a standard hatchback. So overall then, what do I think of the Nissan Juke? Well, I've really been impressed by it. Like, there's definitely a few corners that have been cut here and there, but this high-end model with all of the bells and whistles is a really nice thing to live with day to day. I definitely think it could do with a little bit more shove, and even though the hybrid gearbox works well, sometimes it just isn't quite as responsive enough for my liking. However, overall, I think it's a really lovely thing to live with, especially if you're coming from an older car and you don't want something that's too overwhelming. You want something that feels quite familiar. That's where this really fits in nicely. Now, there are lots and lots of rivals out there, we know that. So if you want something that looks a little bit better and maybe is a little bit more modern in terms of its overall design, especially things like the virtual cockpit and things like that, then the Skoda Kamiq is probably a really good option. You can make those look really nice. I saw a blacked out one yesterday that looked absolutely lovely. And there's the Peugeot 2008, which is a bit more of a tech fest, a little bit more futuristic, and perhaps the styling appeals to you a little bit more than one of these. And then if you want something that's nicer to drive, but perhaps not quite as large inside, the Ford Puma. The Puma comes with some really interesting touches, like the mega box in the back, where you can basically use it to wash stuff out with a drainage plug. And it also just has a much nicer driving dynamic in terms of the weight and the feel of the steering. I do have a full in-depth review of the Puma. I'll pop that in the description below. And yeah, I think that's a really, really solid car, as long as you can sacrifice a little bit of room inside. I definitely think you should shortlist the Nissan Juke. As long as you're cool with its styling, I think it represents a really good package, especially for those people who have had a car for a long period of time and they don't like change too much, because this has some of the really nice modern tech on it without being too overwhelming or difficult to use. It's really intuitive to just get in it and understand exactly how everything works straight away. And I think that's something that some of the rivals don't have nailed. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you to Nissan for sending me out the car. I hope to do some more reviews of their stuff in the near future, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.